tell, do you see the road? I'm out to my soul into the size whenever the smoke clear out of my face and my picture perfect.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to Cypherfics. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the 7th part of, What If BEN10 Meets Powerpuff Girls? Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of man of cartoons on fanfictionnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. At this point, the Avatar was pleased with how things were. Nefarious remained motionless while he stood victorious from a fight that he would admit was on par with his battle with Ozai a year ago. But just when he thought about turning away, he heard chuckling laughter from Nefarious's place. "No way," Aang whispered. His face mixed with shock and worry. The laughing continued. In the past, Nefarious had taken bigger hits more than Aang knew. He had faced powerful heroes such as Danny Phantom, Rex Salazar, Timmy Turner and Bunny Utonium with minor problems until now he was an incredible powerful being. And now that he experienced what he would admit was a swiftly impress move, he stood back to his feet with no sign of pain before facing the Aang once more. "I'll admit I felt that just a little, Avatar," he stated with a hint of excitement in his voice. "However, I can do so much better." The Avatar snarled angrily in response. He had a feeling Nefarious was right about the latter, as even there he could feel the monster's rising power. It made him feel a bit tensed and at the same time acknowledge the fact that the fight was far from over. So with Nefarious's words heard by him verily, Aang got into a waterbending stance and moved his hands in a known fashion for the water in the air around Nefarious to restrain. He made sure the water were tied wrapped around the monster's arms and legs before setting some around his stomach and his neck to keep him at bay. However, while it seemed effective, Nefarious laughed loudly until Aang was done restraining him. "Nice try, Avatar," Nefarious shouted mockingly. At this point, the supervillain felt he had seen enough from the Avatar. He could tell Aang was more powerful than this, but for the time being decided to act before letting his green aura shine bright to the point it blinded him. Then, while the Avatar was seemingly distracted, he broke free from his restraint and rushed at Aang with an intended blow, while at the same time reducing the light. Fortunately, Aang was able to act quickly before he could be hit. He did this by making a huge jump backwards with the aid of his air bending, with the intention on getting more space between him and the monster. But then, while he was in the air, he watched in shock as Nefarious's fist against the ground he once stood caused a shockwave that almost devastated the landscape. However, that wasn't all the monster had up his sleeve. In fact, he showed another impressive feat when he appeared next to Aang and caught him within his huge hand and threw him through the air. Unknown to Aang, this was the first of many things Nefarious could do to him. He found the speed he was thrown to be very straining as even he couldn't control the way he was sent. And just when he was about to turn his staff into a glider, Nefarious appeared right before him and swung his huge fist with so much force that Aang lost his grip on his staff as he was sent crashing through the surface of the ground. Now from the looks of it, Aang's chances of winning were dwindling. He had just made a trail on the ground from that hit from Nefarious, when suddenly he felt the strain from getting up. He didn't want to give the supervillain the chance to get on him, so he had no other choice but to man up and get back on his 2 feet. Unfortunately, his chance to prevail was taken from him brutally when Nefarious came again. The supervillain had another thought in mind as he rushed over to Aang and kicked him like a football that sent him flying through the air, a single rock and then crashing through the surface of the air. This time Aang didn't stand up. "Ha! I congratulate you, Avatar, for surviving this long," Nefarious stated in amusement. It was secret then that the supervillain was belittling the Avatar. He had for a while decided to go a bit out on him before now realizing that he could end up killing the boy before he could go all out on him. Hence, he causally walked over to him and snapped his fingers, causing a bunch of vines to shoot out from underneath Aang and restrained him in a form of bench. "Now isn't that better?" Nefarious continued to amuse. Aang said nothing in response. He let out a groan from his mouth before moving his head at the supervillain, who he then glared angrily at. He would have tried to break free, but his current position made him unable to bend any of the 4 elements needed to break free. However, even if he could, it wasn't much longer before the vine surprisingly sparked small traces of electricity before sending high voltage of it at him, causing him to scream in pain. "Oh, Avatar, you were so promising." Nefarious amused once again. He watched Aang's pain for a brief moment before waving his finger, which ended it. "Honestly, did you really believe you had a chance against me?" he asked rhetorically. "I am a being beyond your world's comprehension. You see, you never had a chance against me." "Why?" "Because I've killed heroes with your kind heart, destroyed their world while bringing emotional suffering to young Tensian. I am not Azula, Ozai, the face stealer, or any being you have and could have faced, even not for the fact I'll be killing you soon." Aang didn't like the sound of that. "Don't be like that, Avatar," Nefarious stated and laughed a bit. "Did Tennyson not tell you every detail about me? Because if he haven't, then let me just tell you there's more to fear than you realize. You see, I've obtained power beyond anything you and your future lifetimes would ever be able to see. I have the powers of a large variety of ghosts." He stopped for a moment to let his green aura to shine. The almost unlimited wish-granting ability of a fairy. He summoned a giant fairy wand to appear in his hand and disappear. And the ability to construct powerful machinery with just a single thought. Just then, he made his right arm to change into a giant grey sword before the Avatar's eyes. He did it out of his own ego and pride as a supervillain, as to him the Avatar would be scared by all he is doing and saying. But then, why did the Avatar crack a small smile despite all this? He's smiling. Nefarious thought to himself. He could see right before him that the boy was indeed smile when really he should be scared. It annoyed him. "What's so amusing, Avatar?" he asked with a daring tone. "Just a thought." Aang answered honestly. "I'm just wondering, if you're so powerful, then why haven't you been able to beat Ben? I mean, he's just a kid like me with a few exceptions." Nefarious growled in a low tone in response. "You do realize with just a few words I can have your whole world, your friends included, to be gone, right? I can make them eat each other, I can have each of them explode into countless atoms or—" "And then what?" Aang suddenly fired back. "You seek power, don't you? That's what this is all about." Nefarious was taken aback by this. He didn't expect the Avatar to have so much willpower in him, especially in the situation he was in. After all, he knew that Ben would've told Aang mostly what he, a monster, had done to his friends in other worlds. But now that the Avatar was speaking, he could feel the boy's willpower increase as he continued. "I've seen it all before, just enough to understand," Aang said confidently. "So I can tell you this. If you define yourself by your power to take life, the longing to dominate, to possess, then you have nothing." A/N, Star Wars Rebels Obi-Wan quote. "And what do you have?" Nefarious asked. "More than what you'll never have. An actual life, something you can never have. I have those I can laugh with, fight with, grow with, and live with for the rest of my life. You have none of that." The words said by the Avatar came honest and clear as they reached Nefarious's elf-like ears. It made the supervillain pause as his eyes narrowly glared at him before then causing the vines to shock him once more. Not surprising, Aang screamed due to the pain as he felt it go all over his body. "Your will is strong. Perhaps, too strong for my liking," Nefarious causally told him. "That is why after I'm done here, I'll let you watch as I kill your friends and those who you consider family right before your very eyes. And just when I've done that, I'll let you witness the destruction of both your world and the spirit world before leaving you in a breathable energy sphere in space for the rest of your life. Let's see how much your willpower lasts then, that is if it isn't broken before then. YYOUWL will any never wi win." Aang shouted in rebuke. I already have. Nefarious replied firmly. He waved his finger at the vines once again, stopping their shocking torture on the Avatar before walking to his side and speaking again. As much as I would love to end you right now, I'm actually close to ending this ultimate search. Huh? Aang was confused. My search? Nefarious said and grinned. He then came to a stop by the young Avatar's side, not looking at him, before continuing. BEN10 doesn't know this yet, but my rampage through different worlds weren't just for the practice and power. No, there's much more to it. What Nefarious said there and then was confusing. This was because, for Aang, he hadn't known the supervillain other than being a monstrous foe with a psychotic mind. But then again, as the monster spoke, he found that thought to change. You see, Avatar, I have one goal. Nefarious continued in his monologue. All this time I crossed through worlds, making alliance and acquiring abnormal powers has been to prepare myself for the ultimate power. That power is the Book of Narration. The Book of Narration? Aang questioned in thought. However, it wasn't known then if Nefarious heard his thoughts like before. The reason for this was because Nefarious only paused before continuing his monologue. With this Goldly book, I can control every single world in the multiverse, including those that possess beings more powerful than I, like the Man of One Punch, the species known as Scions and their elderly godly beings, those who've eaten things known as the devil fruits, the all-powerful Kryptonian and many more. Now this was very surprising to the Avatar. Even though Aang had just met the supervillain a while ago, he could tell that this ambition of his was beyond bad. So then, even though he was still recovering from the shock, he was able to think over what he just learned. However, his time for that moment came to an end as Nefarious walked past him. He made sure to snap his fingers so the vines would turn the Avatar to his direction, before coming to a stop where he heard the Avatar gasp as his eyes laid on what was before him. Surprised, Avatar? Nefarious snickered. He let a side of his head turn at the teen hero before continuing. If you're having any doubt about this, just don't. We're exactly where we are. We are at the place where it all began, the CYCL of the Avatar. No, impossible. Aang muttered in shock. What he was seeing right there and then was something he once thought impossible. He had known about the place and its history due to a being that lives within him as the source of his Avatar powers. But now that he was in that very place, his surroundings all made sense, as his eyes were on the black and red spiritual being imprisoned within a very-looking tree. That's Vaatu. Aang muttered. Nefarious laughed in response to him. He could sense the shock within Avatar before then turning to him fully, with his arms spread up and a wide-open grin on his face. Here's to a wonderful reunion. Avatar Aang, I present Vaatu, your old foe. But he didn't stop there just yet. He let his wide gaping mouth close as a sly smile came across his face, where he then looked slyly at the Avatar. And the place where the northern and southern poles connect. Suddenly, Nefarious's was a bit taken aback by what happened next. He noticed a bright light coming from the Avatar while at the same time feeling as immense power radiating from the boy himself. And just when it died down, he felt a powerful air blast blow right past him with such force that it made his feet skid through the ground a bit. So this is the Avatar state. Nefarious muttered. Interesting. He smirked. True to his words, what he saw before him was Avatar Aang in the famous state of power, the Avatar state. The boy had a deadly scowl on his face, as his eyes were centered on the smirking supervillain, who he looked down up from the top of an air tornado he created. But before said supervillain could do anything, Aang moved his arms a bit in the air before then sending both up in such a way that the rocks underneath Nefarious sent him up into the air. Then, while he was in the air, the Avatar, by his right hand, moved it in a circle by his side to gather large amount of water to surround it before sending it forward at Nefarious, who in the end got hit and crashed into the ground hard. I do not know what you have planned. Aang said in an echoic and powerful voice. But as the Avatar, and in the name of the spirit that lives within me, I will stop you. At this point, not much already known about the Avatar could be said. He was in his most invincible state with such power that Nefarious could still feel it from his crash site. Apparently, Aang's blast had sent him away from the terrains and to the forest area, where he now got back on his feet. Nefarious thought for the time alone to look around. He recognized where he was from being in the air earlier, before finding his time interrupted by the Avatar. This time, Aang landed some meters from him with so much power, the trees and earth was thrown off until it became a ruptured landscape. Even Nefarious had to keep a better footing in order not to be thrown away. Such power, Nefarious thought to himself. Then he grinned sharply. I like it, he muttered. From the looks of it, a battle unlike most of what Nefarious had gone through was about to begin. He liked the thought of fighting the Avatar as his full power, very much, as it may prove to be greater than the powers of the previous heroes he killed. And so, with a loud roar, his whole body began to radiate bright neon green color as he too decided to extend his power to fight the Avatar. Now, with both foes at a greater length of their individual power, Nefarious chuckled before making a large jump at the Avatar. Ever since the beginning of life, good and evil has always combated one another. Most of these battles were represented in the form of said beings whom through their actions would affect the course of their world, be it positively or negatively. So when both the Avatar and Nefarious began their fight, it wasn't just for the fate of their lives in the balance but the very future of the human and spirit world. So as Nefarious charged at Aang engulfed in green light, the teen comprehended the remarkable speed and was able to react. He tightened his fists and sent them downwards, before then separating them apart at their respective sides and to his chest level simultaneously. The result that happened after was two large boulders blocking his path. From the looks of it, these boulders served as his defense against the charging foe. There was no denying it that Nefarious was fast, and in fact faster than he was before, since his charge only took a few seconds to reach the Avatar. Fortunately, with these boulders, the Avatar was safe until they were scattered into pieces by one punch from the supervillain, which in turn forced him to jump back in the air to avoid another blow from the supervillain. However, Nefarious was relentless in his pursuit for the Avatar. He jumped right after the Avatar and was even able to be directly at his close front before throwing a punch at him, which would have been a devastating blow. Fortunately, his attempt failed due to Aang's quick reflex to create an air shield at the side of his head, the target. But that wasn't to say it was the supervillain had to offer. In fact, he was a bit madly glee at the Avatar's defense before seeing said hero land on the ground and cause the ground to break apart just like that. Along with this, a shockwave went through the place, disturbing the balance of standing rocks and trees. The Avatar, however, didn't stick around to notice his action. He could see his enemy coming for him with incredible speed and knew at this point how bloodthirsty he was. And as much as he wanted to be on the offense, he leapt backwards with the supervillain following. Not surprising, Nefarious tried to hit the hero again. He held back his fists with the intention to blow him devastatingly, before then sending all four fists at him with no means to hold back. He didn't care what the outcome would be on the hero, he just went at him in his own enjoyment. Fortunately, the Avatar knew a way to counteract this attack. He moved his hands rapidly in different waves to attract the air around him before finally being able to create an air barrier just in time to receive the blow. This time, the shield withheld. Unlike previous shields though, the Avatar put a bit more effort in it. He let his feet touch the ground before letting it skid through the ground's surface, with his arms forward to maintain the shield. Then, when his foe arrived, he felt him PND on it repeatedly and in a fast pace before resorting to running backwards as soon as it dissipate. However, his efforts still didn't lose Nefarious's taste to hit him with that wide grin on his face. The supervillain seemed so determined that upon catching up with the hero, he threw a single fist for his head to send him flying. But when that happened, it was met with an air shield, with the hero's hand behind it, before he then threw another for his left side, which was also protected like the other. The supervillain wasn't done just yet though. He maintained his wide joyful grin as he threw another failed attempt blow, before finally get another counteract from the hero. This time, the avatar opened his mouth and let out a gust of wind so large that it not only blew apart anything in its way but sent the hero flying backwards, giving him space. But when that also happened, it seemed not to have any effect on Nefarious. The supervillain just went forward at the hero. But this time, the hero went on the offense. He let his feet skid backwards on the Earth's surface, before then making a leapt with the aid of air bending and earth bending which caused the ground to break apart. This was then forward with him sending his hand forward, shooting out a massive fire attack. So with that, Nefarious seemingly had no chance to escape. The flames were so huge that they not only covered him but torched the trees and ground into nothing before dying down to reveal what was in its remaining. And when it seemed Nefarious was gone, he became physically tangible again as he passed the avatar, who ended up landing at the torched area. Now it appeared that both fighters had passed each other. "Impressive, Avatar," Nefarious said to the avatar. He turned to face the avatar. "You almost got me there. Now I know I'll have to double my power." The avatar was silent to respond to him. He had his body facing the supervillain at this point, but at the same time said nothing back on him. His face still retained a scowling while his eyes remained shining blue as it glared at the supervillain. And to add to this, it pleased supervillain. If there was for one thing Ben Tennyson really needed to do for that moment, it would be to get to wherever Aang was. After all, he promised Katara to watch over the bald arrowhead teen, who he now didn't know where he was. He tried getting the huge dial Nefarious used to open the portal, but failed as it refused to budge each time he tried. For the past hour, Ben had tried using Brainstorm, Ear Inferno, and Reality Bender, Very Odd Parents Alien, to get the dial to either work or tear a fabric through time. Sadly, each attempt failed as neither Brainstorm or Grey Matter could get the dial to work despite their high-level intelligence. It also didn't help that with Ear Inferno and Reality Bender couldn't open a portal since Nefarious somehow masked the trace usually left behind from a portal. So that also ruled out Ultimate Ben, as well. "DMN it. Stupid machine." Ben yelled annoyed. So having failed to fix the thing, the hero was back in his human form again. He still wore his casual clothes, as time had passed since the transformation, with him being annoyed at the giant dial. But it didn't help after that he kicked the thing out of frustration. "Ow! My foot!" Ben yelped. The kick to the dial hurt more than he would have expected as it made him place his hurt foot in his hand with a strained face. He hated what was going on, and hated the fact that he couldn't help Aang despite all the power he had. In fact, his frustration towards the dial, and his mild pain, led him to drop his foot and raise his hand over the Omnitrix. "Oh, now you're going to get it," he said directly at the dial. However, before the teen could change, the shadow of a being was casted over him and the ground. It caught him a bit by surprise, as its presence wasn't unexpected to the teen at a time like this. So after a small pause, he looked back and then up at the face of the one responsible. "Oh great, it's you," Ben said with a mildly annoyed voice. The being before Ben wasn't anyone special to him or anything close to that. He knew he was though, but just couldn't feel threatened by him despite their last encounter. So with the same expression as before, the hero was staring at Wan Shi Tong, who was in a more peaceful but scary black and white owl form. "I see you made it here," Wan Shi Tong said with a monotone voice. He didn't seem bothered by the attitude Ben gave towards him earlier at all, as well as the situation he was facing. "This is the same place where the Avatar and his friends went behind my trust and used my library's knowledge to cause violence, something that I am against. And recently, you, the Avatar, and that creature from another world has destroyed generations of knowledge I spent to obtain." "Yeah, so what?" Ben asked with an uninterested look. It wasn't that he didn't care about the destruction caused in the fight, but rather the fact that it was being brought up at a dire situation that made him act that way. And since he was having a bit of a temper at the moment, he raised the Omnitrix at the spirit and spoke sharply. "Look, I don't care right now about your precious library. I just want to get to wherever Aang is and help him out before Nefarious takes him away. But if you feel like fighting again, and wrecking more of your library, just know I got enough forms to level your entire place to ground. So don't bug me. I see. The bird spirit said. He didn't show any emotion in response. Do you have anything to add to that? Yeah, I do. Ben answered. He put his Omnitrix arm back to his side and faced the bird spirit again, this time a bit calmly. You can hate Aang and me for what we did, but just know Nefarious is the main cause of what happened here. He controlled you to destroy most of the stuff you got just to keep Aang and I busy while he gets closer to taking over the multiverse. So if you don't help me open that gate portal thing, he's not only going to kill Aang, but possibly destroy the spirit world, along with everything you worked for, and the human world. Or even something really worse. At this point it was becoming clear that Ben was running out of patience. He didn't know what was happening to Aang, nor was he sure if he could handle the hero losing his life like some of the other heroes did. And while he would like to believe Aang could hold his own against the supervillain, he didn't want the teen to die in a fight he shouldn't be in. It also didn't help that his only possible assistance was Wan Tong, who just stood there quietly before walking past him to the huge dial. Centuries ago, lost in the history books of mankind, this dial was made for many purposes. The bird spirit began to explain. Those purposes were to observe the stars, observe the time of the seasons in their many beauties, and acknowledge the past as well as its future. For long it remained that way until it became an alternate entry to the center of the harmonic convergence. The harmonic convergence? Ben asked, confused. What's that? The harmonic convergence is a supernatural phenomenon that occurs once every 10,000 years. When the planets are aligned, spiritual energy is greatly amplified, causing the spirit portals of the North and South poles to merge, while the aura of spirit energy envelopes the Earth. Wow! That sounds cool. Ben awed a bit. However, the bird spirit continued. The one who you call Nefarious found that opening those portals wouldn't be possible without the Avatar. So rather than confronting him, he decided to use my observatory dial to open a forced portal to the center, knowing full well that the harmonic convergence would not start for years to come. Okay. Ben said. So why did he go there? Vatu. Wan Tong answered. Apparently, the thought of the one he just said made him to turn to the teen hero, who he then narrowed his eyes at. Before the Avatar CYCL started, there existed two great spirits that have lived over 10,000 lifetimes. The spirit of peace and light was the one known as Rava, and her opposite, the spirit of chaos and darkness, Vatu. So not surprising, these powerful beings fought one another with no one the victor until Avatar 1, the first Avatar, was manipulated by Vatu and broke them apart, dooming the human and spirit world. I could explain further into the details of what transpired afterwards, but we are losing time. Do you not agree? Yeah. You're right. Ben answered and nodded. There was no doubt in him there that the bird spirit was right. He knew since being separated from Aang that he needed to get to him quick before Nefarious could possibly overpower him or do something worse. But as much as he would like to get there, he had to wait on Wan Tong, who then went directly to the point. I will help you get to the center. The bird spirit said. I do not like the Avatar nor shall I forgive him for abusing my library with his friends a year ago. But I very well acknowledge the danger of Nefarious possessing Vatu's power for his own. He plans to become the Dark Avatar, almost similar to how the Avatar became to be. That I am sure of. Oh, Ben paused. That doesn't sound good. It doesn't. Wan Tong replied. He didn't change his personality in the slight soon afterwards when he heard the teen hero's response. So rather than dwell on it, he turned back to his dial, where he then spread his wings and said. I saw his plan when I was within his control. Now time to fix this piece of knowledge to stop him. Shot after shot, speed against speed, the fight seemed to be going on for a while. The Avatar and Nefarious were giving off so much power with little to no regard of the landscape they were now in. It wasn't like Aang could stop the destruction. He just wished he could keep the fighting at a minimal. Sadly, his wish didn't seem to come true. In fact, even though it didn't seem like he cared due to his furious-looking glow of his tattoos, he still kept in mind of how much destruction that Nefarious was bringing just in an attempt to hit him. But then again, that didn't mean he had to lessen his attacks against the all-powered monster before him. Currently though, the battle seemed to have escalated. The Avatar was running backwards once again while Nefarious gave chase with incredible speed. It also seemed that, from the looks of it, Aang would have been attacked if not that he was punching out large air blasts from his fists to stop the villain or in the very least to say him down. But sadly, his attacks were evaded by the supervillain, who by doing so let whatever that was behind him to be destroyed. Fortunately, the Avatar seemed to realize this as he changed tactics. He decided to stop his offense attacks, seeing as they weren't working, before placing both arms to his sides and letting out a large amount of flames to launch him away from the supervillain. Then, upon getting more space from the supervillain, his feet skidded through the surface of the ground as he felt ready for Nefarious again. Nefarious right now didn't seem to show any tactical means other than trying to hit the Avatar. Maybe he was pitying him, or just toying with him to see his true power. Either way, the Avatar didn't care what it was. He instead placed his left leg forward before making a leap at Nefarious, and doing a double single turn for a reason. This reason became obvious as he shot two waves of fire at Nefarious, who was in the way of it. But in some twist of bad luck, Nefarious became intangible to avoid them, before then becoming tangible as he came to a stop. At the same time, the Avatar did another spin before letting his feet skid on the ground's surface again. However, they didn't pause a few seconds after. Nefarious turned at Aang and made a leap at him while at the same time the Avatar did the same was ready. He could have jumped at him as well, but for his own reasons chose not to do that. So instead, he moved up his legs apart from each other, placed his arms to align with them, before then raising them up at their respective sides and moving them forward at Nefarious. The result after this was two large boulders, from both his sides, flying straight at Nefarious, with him making a leap at the supervillain. Now as both of them were about to approach each other, their faces were at each other. As the distance was closing, Aang tightened his fist when he saw the chance to act again while Nefarious did the same, ready to blow him. But just when they were close enough, Aang crossed his arms and sent the boulders for Nefarious, who in return became intangible and flew right through them and past the hero. The scene from then onwards felt odd. The Avatar's boulders hit the ground far away as their forger ended up landing on the ground, while their intended target landed at where Aang once was despite having the chance to strike him when intangible. However, it didn't mean much to the Avatar then. He instead did a turn upon landing on the ground, before kicking the ground with such force that large number of shard of earth shot out and made a trail towards Nefarious. But this seemed to deter the supervillain from going after the Avatar. He could see the large shards of earth heading for him and in the process felt no threat towards it. Hence, when it did almost hit him, he opened his mouth and let out a large stream of green energy beam to destroy them, which they did. Then, while the dust cloud was present, he went right through it and slid down on the Avatar. At least that was what he was aiming for. Fortunately, his swift attack didn't reach the Avatar. The reason for this was due to Aang seeing his attack coming, before then jumping forward at the supervillain just in time to dodge the attack. But by doing so, a shockwave spread everywhere as it destroyed anything within the area or just sent them flying. As for the Avatar, his jump led him to have his hand over Nefarious' head before unleashing a furious burst of fire that not only covered his entire body but burnt everything within its path. So from the looks of it, the fire blast could be compared to firebenders on the day of Sozin's comet. It burnt every single thing in sight as not a single thing of nature could withstand the blast despite being spiritual. Then, once it came down, the result of it revealed the area burnt to be entirely torched. Unfortunately, this didn't seem to have much effect on Nefarious. It was true the hit was so close to destroy him, but then, when looked at again, Nefarious was revealed to be fine with an ectodome around him. As for the avatar, he landed on the ground behind him with his back at him due to a flip he did. However, his position seemed to leave him open for an attack. It was obvious if anyone else was seeing this and was a wide chance for Nefarious, who suddenly then charged at the hero. But just when he got close, Aang jumped over him backwards and did a flip which sent a huge slice of air to hit him. So though Nefarious wasn't able to show it, the avatar's attack was a surprise. It not only sent him flying through another part of the forest but cut anything that was within its way, miles away. However, it didn't take a minute sooner for the supervillain to run towards the hero, as not a single scratch was from him. But just as it seemed he was the only one, Aang ran after him with determination. Soon enough, the battle escalated more than it had become before. Aang and Nefarious would charge at each other while sending off their own attacks in an attempt to hit each other. The only reason they kept at it was because Nefarious was an elusive enemy, who wanted to give the blow rather than receiving it. Hence, when a time came that he almost hit Aang, he took it. The supervillain and Aang were at each other, going straight at each, as Aang this time sent a rock flying at him. But when it almost did, the supervillain flew intangible through it with ease and became tangible when he got close to Aang. Fortunately for the hero, he was able to kick his right leg with such force that a blast of air pushed him away from the supervillain's blow. So other than that, the fighting was somewhat the same. The hero fought hard against the supervillain, while the latter did the same with a huge grin. And just when it seemed everything was like that, with both heroes sending attacks and missing, Nefarious got the avatar by surprise when he rushed at him and launched a punch against his stomach with much force that Aang was sent flying away from the area. However, that wasn't all that the avatar went through. Apparently, the punch was so strong that his body went through large rocks before coming to a stop by crashing into the bottom of a mountain, creating a large crater. It was a good thing this didn't seem to do much harm for him, as he soon sat up and saw Nefarious coming. The speed the supervillain was using was amazing despite he had the ability to fly. He just had a wicked grin on his face, while the avatar took a few seconds to see him before deciding to take action. And by this, he meant to roll on his front, get on his hands and legs, before causing the mountain to levitate from the ground and fly straight at Nefarious. Unfortunately, rather than hit the enemy destroyed. The supervillain had seen it coming and so decided to immediately jump at it with his feet stomping right through it, all the while heading for the avatar. But just when he did, the hero jumped out of the way before proceeding to run backward while he stomped down on where he once stood, causing a huge dust cloud to shoot up to the air. However, the supervillain was too determined to let this stop him. He could see how fast the avatar was running and so ran after him with such speed that he closed the gap. But for some reason he decided not to increase that speed to actually hit him. Good thing the reason became clear as the chase continued, as it turned out to be Aang's fault. It turned out then that the dust wind created by Aang's running was finally having an effect on the supervillain as it resulted in him being unfocused. So in other words, it not only made him reduce his speed to a certain level but throw punches that the avatar was able to dodge and change directions. And since his punches were downward ones, dust clouds were shot up to the air with each missed blow. But then things began to change when they ran on top of a mountain. Nefarious was still trying to hit Aang, with each attempt failing, while said hero kept running backwards around the mountain to make it to the top. The reason for this was unknown, but it was probably due to Nefarious's now gaining speed at the hero. Therefore, upon getting to the top, Aang made a huge leap upwards. He did it with the use of air bending and earth bending, which by the jump caused the entire mountain to collapse with Nefarious supposedly with it. But even when that thought came across, the supervillain emerged out of huge dust cloud with all his four fists drawn back to hit the avatar. However, the hero didn't let the supervillain get his way. He created a sphere for which he was in it, just in time for Nefarious to reach him and begin throwing numerous punches at it to break it. The supervillain didn't care how much he would have to it, he just went at it as he pleased. Meanwhile, as more blows came in, both Nefarious and Aang were going higher in the air. The ground they had once been was becoming small while the avatar found it somewhat difficult to keep the sphere in place. He could see how ruthless Nefarious was in his attempt to hit him and so in the process extended his hands to maintain it. Unfortunately, even this did little to help it. The Avatar was losing concentration on it while the supervillain freely continued his advance as they kept going higher into the air. Hence, since it was so much for the hero to take, he sent his arms up to their respective sides, dissipating the sphere instantly, before bringing them close to his chest and moving them to form a small ball of air. Meanwhile, Nefarious let out a triumphant laugh as he sent all 4 arms at Aang. He didn't seem to mind what the hero was doing though, nor was he concerned about it as he sent all those fists at him. But before he could, the Avatar formed a ring of fire and water around it before sending it straight at Nefarious to intercept his fists. The result of it led to an explosion that rocked the skies. But when they got back on the ground, both fighters landed almost simultaneously on the ground, causing it to either shake or break apart, with them feet away from each other and eyes glaring at one another. "Impressive power, Avatar," Nefarious remarked. "As I thought, the Avatar state is a force of nature unlike any I've seen." The Avatar wasn't impressed to hear this. "Of all the heroes I've fought and killed," Nefarious continued, his neon green aura now growing larger than before, "only you have survived this long." Just then, the supervillain let out a roar and made his power grow. His neon green aura shot right into the sky as it became energy, while his back made a pack with a giant fairy wand attached to it upwards, with his arms extended forward to form a large cannon covered in dark blue aura. "Now to release the destructive energy held within me," he shouted. "Tell me, Avatar, can you survive this power? With this, even a normal person will have even their bones vaporized." The Avatar didn't respond. The reason for it was unknown. However, even if he did, the chance was too late for him. Nefarious charged up his cannon in its fullest and let out a giant-size blast made up of green sparkling energy with blue rings around it so powerful that it would destroy everything within its path. It was the combined power of ghost power, fairy magic and the Omega Nanite all into one. However, such destructive power never reached the Avatar. The reason was because the Avatar was standing a few feet from the blast range, having dodged it just in time. That wasn't to say though that his clothes were alright from the other fighting. But then, Nefarious had another trick up his sleeve. He ran off from where he once stood, went past the Avatar back, before appearing at his side and sending a punch for his head. "Behind you!" he shouted. Fortunately, the Avatar also had one trick as well. He quickly reacted to the enemy's attack by smacking the back of his hand at his wrist, causing the fist to redirect and shoot out a large ecto-beam at another section of the forest, destroying everything in its path. I'm impressed," Nefarious said and chuckled. Before, the supervillain hadn't believed that Aang would have lasted long with him in a fight. Sure, he believed how powerful the Avatar state was, and its uses, but it hadn't come to him then that the teen hero would not only evade his attacks, but keep up with him despite his sound-breaking speed. And now that he was proven wrong, he took a few steps back while facing the Avatar. "You have done well in my eyes, Avatar," Nefarious continued saying. "However, the outcome of this battle is clear. Why, you may ask? It's because I have the knowledge, skill and power to wipe you out. I have faced heroes and allied with villains who would amaze you in their abilities. And so, with those experiences, and with yours, I shall have no difficulty facing the next hero and BEN10. Just then, the supervillain came to a stop on his speech and raised his hand at the all-powerful Avatar. "So do you have anything to say?" he asked and waited. There was no response. "Very well," he said. "This is where you die, Avatar." Again, Aang didn't say anything in response to the supervillain. It didn't mean he didn't hear him or was ignoring him though. No, it was mainly because he was less talkative in the Avatar state. But that didn't matter to Nefarious in the slightest. The supervillain had his eyes still on Aang before then charging at him, ready to end him with one punch. But just when he was about to land the blow, Aang instinctively moved his head out of the way before doing a curve run to the supervillain's back, which was followed with a jump spin. And by staying in the air, he brought both arms forward and let out a powerful air blast capable of destroying everything in its path. So with that done, it came as no surprise that Aang's attack did so much destruction. One of the few parts of the forest that was intact from the fight had remained that way until it received Aang's power. Hence, what was left of it was a huge trench, as whatever had remained there was entirely gone, although Nefarious' body could be seen lying in the middle. So before the supervillain could get back to his feet, Aang struck again. He ran straight at the supervillain with a gust of wind behind him, while the enemy was getting up, jumped and swung an air kick so strong that it sent the supervillain flying away. However, the hero didn't stop just there. He saw the speed by which Nefarious was sent away, before causing two large boulders like before to follow him as he ran for the supervillain. This time, however, he sent both arms forward just for them to slam at Nefarious' body instantly. Or so it seemed. At first, it seemed like Nefarious was affected by the attack. But when the boulders did slam at him, they exploded into pieces of rocks by a green light, with Nefarious coming right out of it with 4 wings on his back. Then, upon fixing his eyes on the Avatar, he flew after him. But before he could reach the hero, the teen did something unexpected. He brought his arms to his chest before letting his body fall backwards on the ground, allowing the earth to take him inside and close like sliding doors. However, since Nefarious saw this, he engulfed his right upper arm in green flames and struck it down at the particular place. "Nice try, Avatar!" he shouted. The supervillain had a sense of what the Avatar had in mind. He had seen how the earth took him in and so in the process knew to destroy the ground, which he then did. But when that happened, Aang emerged out of it with his back against the supervillain, before doing a flip and sending a slice of fire so huge that it sent Nefarious flying while in the process destroying the earth. But it didn't end just there for the hero. In fact, once Nefarious' body was shot out of the dust cloud created by his attack on the ground, Aang shot out of the earth again and did a turn that led to him swinging his arm across his chest, resulting a wave of air to tear through the air and send Nefarious flying another way. However, just following that attack, Nefarious came right at Aang with his claws out to tear him in one swipe. He had received the Avatar's attack in its full might, but due to his enhanced healing and armor was able to move as much as he still could. But instead of hitting Aang, his target jumped to the left, causing him to punch the ground and cause a shockwave that sent rocks flying. The Avatar was, fortunately, able to find some use of this attack. He took notice of some of the rocks still in the air before pulling his arms to his sides for them to form an armor made out of rocks. It covered his entire body from head to toe, but allowed his eyes some space to see what was in front of him. But then, the supervillain came after him with a new thought in mind. He had all his 4 bloody red eyes glow before unleashing a giant-sized blast of red energy so powerful that whatever that stood in its path was annihilated. So sadly, Aang was in its way when it happened. Now, by this point, Aang's fate would seem sealed due to the fact of no escape. Nefarious's beams were not only huge in size, but they were able to do what he intended for them, which was obviously for destruction. But when he noticed a gap within his beam's range, he knew something was up. And indeed he was right to believe that. The gap he was witnessing revealed itself to be Aang, who miraculously was able to stay alive due to the rock armor formed all over his body while having his wrists protecting his face. But unfortunately, it didn't mean he would last for much longer. Hence, from the looks of it, it was obvious for him to feel that way. The ground he stood on was rapidly dissipating while the air around him was cut off from him breath. And to add to that, he had to focus on his standing as his predicament made it hard to bend the other elements. So while all that happened, Nefarious continued his track. He could see how he was overwhelming the Avatar and as such continued without feeling his power draining by the slightest. But as that went on, the Avatar did something remarkable by leaping straight at Nefarious and sending both fists at his 2 lower eyes. "Ah! My eyes!" Nefarious cried out. Now the Avatar seemed to have the advantage. He let what remained of his rock armor to fall apart before landing on the ground on one knee and sending his arms forward. The reason for this became obvious as his move sent two large waves of rocks from both sides to cover Nefarious, sending him flying away. From then on, things went bad for Nefarious. His body crashed through various sizes of boulders before finally ending to a stop, which then led to the Avatar striking again. This time, the hero came by the side from a run and swung a kick a few feet away that sent a wave of air to hit the supervillain and send him flying again. Then, while he was screaming, the Avatar shot out of the ground a few feet away and did a few movements that caused a pillar of earth to shoot out and hit the supervillain so precisely that he was sent flying upwards into the air. Ah! Nefarious screamed. From the looks of it, the supervillain seemed to be losing this battle. One moment he was being triumphant over the Avatar, and the next he was being victim of said hero. But just to add insult to injury, the Avatar came right above him, circled his arms apart from each other, before sending both of down at him with such precision that a devastating blast of air not only hit him very hard but sent him crashing back to the ground. The collision immediately after was so powerful that a shockwave went through the entire landscape. But even so, the Avatar wasn't done dealing with the supervillain. In fact, he did a nosedive directly above the monster as he prepped himself for an impact he was sure would be very effective. So first he created the same air sphere like before then adding earth, water and fire in a pyramid form which together led to an impact unlike any the spirit world would ever feel. So what basically happened next was a loud boom followed by a shockwave. This shockwave not only destroyed almost everything in the landscape but sent a powerful energy that swept through the spirit world, causing the ground, water and trees to shake violently for a moment as well as sending weaker spirits flying. Those that were strong to stand were either confused or intrigued. However, what was very much changed was the scene with both fighters. They were no longer standing or fighting each other like before. Instead, the Avatar stood with both feet on Nefarious, who was panting heavily while his armor had major cracks on it and wounds on his visible skin. "PL please no more," Nefarious said with a weak voice. I am so weak. Please don't kill me, Avatar Aang." "Kill him?" Aang thought in his mind. For a good reason, this thought disturbed him a bit more than he should. It made his glowing eyes to widen for the first time since, before then shutting them close with his tattoo's light dying down back to normal. "No. I won't do that," Aang said with a soft voice. He opened his eyes and glared at Nefarious. "I won't take another person's life no matter how cruel they are." At that moment, the Avatar felt right in what he believed. He could have gone ahead and killed Nefarious, but in the end chose not to. And while it may seem like a bad choice, he landed back on the ground with his back at the supervillain. "You're evil, very evil," Aang muttered. "But I won't end this fight with murder." Nefarious suddenly cocked a grin. Then you will die." "Huh?" Aang looked back. The Avatar had just a few seconds to take in what the supervillain had said before something unexpected happened. He turned sideways at the supervillain to look at him, before taking a step back just in time to avoid a punch from a duplicate standing there. But just before he could counterattack, the duplicate disappeared and the Avatar was attacked from the back. "Aha!" Avatar Aang screamed. The suffering he was going through was painful beyond anything he felt. He felt intense electricity hit him directly at the back, with more pouring into him with no way of getting away. Also, worse of all, he was switching in and out of the Avatar state unintentionally, endangering not just him but the CYCL of the Avatar. Ha 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 ha. Nefarious laughed. Unlimited po WWE. The true outcome of the fight had finally revealed itself, with Nefarious seemingly the winner. He had both his arms extended at the Avatar and fingers shooting out intense green electricity as any restraint he felt before was gone. He just kept on sending more power at the Aang before using it to toss his body far away with his screams echoing. The supervillain then stood up. "Heroes are so foolish," he said and chuckled. It felt good to pretend to be weak, especially now that he knew Aang shared the no-kill rule as most heroes. And even though he was wounded, he snapped his finger before being engulfed in a pink sparkling cloud which instantly dealt with all of that. Soon enough, the supervillain jumped the same direction he had sent the avatar. It wasn't just to watch him suffer, but because it was the same location the time tree and his prize, Batu, was waiting for him. This is troubling. Wan Shirtong said. His eyes were narrowed with seriousness clearly showing. Some time had passed since he offered his services to Ben, with work on it progressing well. Once in a while Ben would ask about it, to which he was answered with the word, no, while the bird spirit continued fixing the dial. It was somewhat infuriating to have a human treat him like that, but it wasn't like he had any other choice. However, with a new disturbance that could only be felt by the spirit, Ben was worried by the spirit's words. Hey, what do you mean by that? He asked. What else is there? The bird spirit asked rhetorically with his monotone voice. He even went further on this by turning his neck halfway to his back to glare at Ben. A wave which you cannot feel for being human was felt all over the spirit world. He explained. This was the work of the avatar. But now his presence seems to be disappearing. Oh no. Ben whispered. The look of shock and fear was on his face as he said it. In fact, the news was so bad that he tightened his fists and looked down at the ground to hold back his tears. No, I can't let him die, I promised Katara. He whispered. Wan Shirtong sighed in response. He heard what the human said and in his honesty couldn't care any way about it. He considered such emotions to be human sentiments, and so turned his head back to the dial which he touched a few more before taking a few steps back. Hey, Wan Shirtong, Ben said again. This time he was looking at the spirit determinedly. How long till that thing works? You said my name right. That's a first. The spirit responded with a bit of sarcasm. As for the dial, it is ready. Suddenly, the symbols on the dial came to light before shooting out electricity and a circular portal appearing above it. This brought a bit of hope for Ben. I'm going in. Ben stated with a determined voice. He reached for the Omnitrix and began turning the dial, to which he didn't look as he marched to the portal. Wish me luck. He said. Wan Shirtong said nothing in response. He watched as the hero went for the portal, before then turning his back at him and walking away with nothing else to say. He did notice a flash of green light engulf Ben, but other than that he just went his way. Pain, that was the only thing Aang could think about. After fighting Nefarious to the best of his abilities, he found himself in a very difficult position. His entire body was staggering with electricity, as they kept his from being able to do anything while groaning in pain. However, what made this even worse was the fact that Nefarious walked over to him, looking down at him with a malicious grin. You gave me quite the thrill, Avatar. He said with a hint of mockery. Now stay here and die slowly in agony. I have a multiverse to take over, after all. Aang couldn't give a proper response. Last time, when he was struck by lightning, he should have been in a coma, on his way to death's door. But for some reason, he could just feel his life force draining slowly while he could do nothing. The supervillain obviously saw this, and so didn't feel threatened by the Avatar as he turned his back at him, heading straight for the time tree, where Vato was still imprisoned. Aang, cried out a familiar young voice. Aang's eyes snapped open. BEN. For a second, the Avatar thought he was hearing things. But that seemed to change when a blue portal appeared right at his left side and a hand reached out to him. Aang, you have to take my hand. Quick. Ben's voice cried out. The Avatar groaned hard in response. The thought of moving, especially in his state, was proving troublesome. But he didn't let that stop him. He suppressed all the pain in him and raised his right hand to Ben's hand, which he then gripped. Once that happened, Ben's entire hand and whatever was attached to him became misty energy that followed right into the Avatar, with the portal closing right after. Fortunately, the portal didn't matter. What mattered there, at that moment, was what happened to Aang. The Avatar felt his entire body heal rapidly, as his body began to accommodate the newfound power within him that allowed him to get on his knees. At the same time, his appearance was changing into something entirely. Gone was the remainder of his air-bending clothes that he had worn. In its place was a suit that was entirely black, with sparkling stars on it. In addition, he wore a white cape with blue lines racing from the shoulders to the bottom of the cape, where at the middle was the symbol of the air nomads, while wearing red gloves that had the insignia of the Fire Nation on them. The same could almost be said for his brown shoes, which had the insignia of the Earth Nation, as well as a blue belt around his waist that represented the northern and southern water tribes. But just to complete the entire look, the Omnitrix symbol appeared on his chest, symbolizing the wearer of the Omnitrix. However, that wasn't all that happened. The Avatar's body began to glow brightly, as his eyes and tattoos began to shine bright blue like in the Avatar state. But despite the combined power the body was feeling, it came at a price. The Avatar's body was taking a lot of strain as he groaned in agony and struggled to stay on his knees. It wasn't an easy task, as those few seconds he endured felt painful to him until he maintained his position. Then, with a loud cry, the Avatar pushed his head up and his arms out, letting out a powerful cosmic beam up into the air, before getting back on his feet in his new form. But just as his appearance had changed, so did the command of the body when the three voices of Ben, Aang, and Rava spoke simultaneously. "We are one." Meanwhile, Nefarious stood a few feet from Vatul. He could already see the spiritual embodiment of evil with a wide smile on his face, when he came to a stop with a confused expression. He felt tremendous power, more powerful than his own, just at the moment a beam of light shot into the air. The same seemed to also be felt by Vatul, whose attention looked forward at the cause of it, to a surprise. "Such power," Vatul muttered. Nefarious didn't like hearing this. He turned back without haste and narrowed his eyes at the single figure now standing with powerful wind going around him to make his cape flap in the air. "We are one," he heard them say. Nefarious snarled in response to this. He noticed the symbol on the Avatar's chest and knew exactly who it was. "Tennyson!" Nefarious cried out in anger. "You won't stop me. Not when I'm close to true ultimate power." So with that said, Nefarious didn't hold back. He took in a fresh of breath and let out his ghostly wail straight at the combined heroes. The wail was larger than anything Danny Phantom and his alternate future self had done as it ruptured the very ground in its path, not just to pieces but to the point that anything hit with it would be ripped apart in mere seconds. However, when it came straight for the combined heroes, it had no effect. Aang's eyes just glow bright green, with pupils shining blue, before he then raised his single hand that stopped the wail in its track. It was a surprising sight, as the Avatar showed no strain when his body did it, even when it came to a stop. But that wasn't to say Nefarious was happy about this. "TV's boys!" Nefarious yelled in anger. This was then followed with his energy powering out. The ghost powers, fairy magic and even the nanite power became multicolored energy that coated him as he narrowed his four bloody red eyes at the combined heroes. "These heroes. They make me want to go all out." With that said, Nefarious charged at them. The speed he went was beyond what he used against the Avatar before, as it broke the speed of light in seconds and kept increasing. This was then followed with him creating three other duplicates, which held the same speed level and power, as they closed in on the combined heroes and began going around the Avatar like a tornado, plowing down on him with powerful punches. These blows weren't any ordinary blows, they were ones combined with the brute of his immeasurable strength. Not surprising, the effect it had was devastating. The spirit world could feel its own very foundations shaking as large earthquakes went about everywhere, ripping the very energy it had. But in a way, it was able to not tear apart entirely. As for the center, where the fight was going on, the very ground, mountains, forests, and just about anything, except the time tree was destroyed in seconds. However, there was one thing and person it had no effect on. That person was the combined heroes. It seemed the Avatar was able to shield himself with his hands shielding his face, as he took in all the uncountable punches from the blows Nefarious was giving him. But just when it seemed the supervillain was getting to him, the Avatar suddenly punched him right in the stomach with such force that he spat out in pain and was sent flying miles away. And no! Nefarious cried out. The force of the Avatar's new power was immense. It didn't even feel like he was going all out. But just with that blow, Nefarious was sent flying back, even when he applied so much of his power to stop until he did come to a stop and began to breathe. No, this can't be. I can't let them. The supervillain was suddenly cut off, almost literally. The reason was due to the Avatar, who seemingly appeared before him, only to then punch consecutively at him with just one hand. The force of those multiple punches was not only able to tear Nefarious apart into pieces, but send massive shockwave to whatever that was in its way. However, the battle wasn't over yet. In fact, Nefarious refused to let it be that way. His body may have been torn apart into numerous pieces, but he was still alive. Hence, it came as no surprise to him that all of him came back into one piece, one body again, before he flew up into the air with his arms down at the combined heroes. "You leave me nochoice," cried out Nefarious. And true to his words, he decided to deliver. An energy pack with a giant wand appeared on his back as his arms shaped into a huge blue-colored cannon with the mouth leaking out misty green ghost energy. "I'll pour everything in this one shot. I'll destroy not just this world, but the entire universe. Nothing will be left standing." The combined heroes said nothing. Their eyes were up at Nefarious as his cannon began to charge up in a rapid pace until it was at full power. Then, with a loud cry, he let out a devastating energy blast composed of a ray of green ghost energy and sparkling blue lights with yellow magic rings around it. Big Bang Rapture, Universe Destroyer. From the looks of it, this blast truly had the potential of which it was named. It came down at the combined heroes at undetermined amount of speed that it caused their cape to fly backwards. But if even at this state, the Avatar's face seemed unmoved as his fist was tightened. This has gone far enough. So with that said came the effect. The tightened fist of the Avatar formed a dome of air that was then accompanied by a ring of fire and water, opposite of each other. At the same time, a ring of water formed above the dome, just as green lines formed on the Avatar's arms, heading down to his fist, before he swung his fist up at the incoming universal destroying blast. The impact of the blow not only halted the attack, but it sent every part of it back at Nefarious, whose eyes widened in complete horror at what was about to happen. No! And so with that cry was the inevitable. The energy blast meant to destroy the combined heroes came fully on him, causing him to cry out in pain. The rest of it shot out into the sky until it, leaving a large trace as it was sent into a void where it would do no harm. It's finally over. Though they may not seem like it, those voices were relieved at the outcome. Nefarious was defeated once again from enacting his complete plan of multiverse domination. But as the combined heroes stood, they looked around them with a move of the Avatar's head and realized the state of things before his head returned back to its proper place. Let's fix this, shall we?" their voice said in unison. Just then, with the Avatar's hands spread out, the body flew back as it began to light up bright blue. They had seen the amount of damage the spirit world had received, until now they decided to fix it. Hence, with the blue aura on the Avatar's body, everything around them began to reform back to the way it was. The forest, the mountains, the yin and yang symbol at the large clearing in the middle, and just about everything within the area and the spirit world as a whole was fixed to the way it was. Done. The combined heroes said. And indeed, they were right. The entire area and the spirit world as well were back to the way it was before the fight against Nefarious. But as the aura around them died down, their focus went on the time tree, which they then flew down and stood before it, looking at Vaatu. The evil spirit was still encased in the same cosmic prison the first Avatar had kept him in, so he wasn't a threat. But that didn't keep Vaatu from looking down at the figure before them. "So are you here to finish me off, Rava?" said the evil spirit. "No," replied Rava's voice. It was that to the echo of a woman as the avatar's eyes were still at the evil spirit. Light cannot exist without darkness. However, you have seen too much, and I fear this might motivate you to attempt something that'll threaten the balance that Wong and our lifetimes have fought so hard to maintain. So I will take away your memory of everything so that the future might be safe. Is that so, Rava? Questioned Vatu. He didn't seem intimidated or fearful as he continued. Do as you must. But know this. One of these days I will be free, and when that happens, my wrath will be known. And when that happens, the one who will take the mantle of the Avatar will be there to stop you. Rava said without fear. And so with came the next move. The Avatar's hand was raised at the evil spirit before lighting up and doing what Rava intended. Back to the human world, things were the way they always were. As for the Fire Nation island that Nefarious had once wreaked havoc, the same could be said about the place following the day. The number of help had increased to the point that the wounded and the homeless were able to get the best medical help they could get. But as much as Katara liked that, she couldn't help but feel worried about a certain bald-headed teen. I wonder if Aang is okay. Katara sighed with a depressed sigh. A few hours had passed since she had last seen her boyfriend. She knew he had help in the form of BEN10, but couldn't stop the thought that something might have gone wrong. Hence, despite given the chance, she had remained in the Admiral's tent, sitting at the long table while looking at a cup of water in her hands, alone. However, her solitude was ruined when a bit of sunlight burst in as someone pushed the curtain of the entrance to enter. It was revealed to be her brother, as he walked right in and closed the entrance before walking over to his sister, who looked at him as he came closer. Hey, Sokka, is everything doing all right? Katara asked. Yeah, everything's fine. Sokka replied. But the look on his face said something else. It was filled with concern, which he couldn't hide as he placed his hand comfortingly on his sister's shoulder. You're worried about him, aren't you? Yes. Katara answered and turned back to her glass. I don't know why, but I feel something bad happened to Aang. That can't be. Sokka stated boldly. He refused to acknowledge what could have been the fate of his best friend. So with his arms wrapped around his chest, he sat on the table while looking down at his sister. Don't mention this, but that guy Ben, I'm pretty sure he won't let any harm come to Aang. He's been fighting that nefarious guy longer than we know, so Aang should be fine. Besides, Aang's the Avatar, it's that monster that should be worried about what Aang would do to him. Katara found this nice to hear. Her brother sounded more confident than her, which was a bit surprising. Usually, he would be the one overthinking things or dismissing others if they didn't hold any fact. But now that she let his words sink in, she let a smile formed on her face before turning to her brother. Thank you, Sokka, I needed to hear that. She said. I know. Sokka smiled back. Suddenly, both siblings found their attention diverted to something at their side. It was Blue Portal, which had appeared out of nowhere, until two familiar figures walked out, revealing themselves to be Ben and Aang, standing next to each other. Aang! Katara cried out. The Water Tribe girl's voice was filled with relief and happiness. The tension she felt before was swept away as her eyes lay on the boy she loved. So it came as no surprise that she immediately got off her seat, ran over to Aang and embraced him in a hug. As for her brother, he just smirked with his arms just crossed over his chest. See? I told you so. He said. Then he watched as Aang embraced his sister back before turning his attention to Ben, who then chose that chance to stand next to him, looking over at the couple. So you guys took care of it? He asked the hero. Yup. Ben nodded. Good to hear. Sokka commented. Back at the couple, both of them were obviously happy to see each other. They didn't need to say a word nor indicate it as they embraced each other in their arms. But once that was over, both pulled away, revealing happy looks on their faces as they made eye contact. Katara, we did it. We beat Nefarious. Aang said happily. I know, Aang. Katara replied with full honesty. I doubted a while ago, but I'm just glad to see you're okay and that you made it true. I'm so sorry about that. You don't need to apologize. Aang told her honestly. If it weren't for Ben, I likely wouldn't have made it through this. You should be thanking Ben. You don't have to, dude. Ben commented. He paused for a bit to see couple face him before smirking at them, revealing his teeth. I was just fulfilling my promise to Katara. And now that I have, I better get going. I have to make sure that Maniac is down for good. Wait, what? Aang questioned, confused and shocked. Are you talking about Nefarious? I thought we beat him for good. We did, Ben said, but not in the way you think. I think Rava noticed that. Rava? Sokka questioned. He took that confusion on his face and looked over to Aang. Who's that? Is it Spirit you guys met? It's a long story. Aang said, though he didn't seem mindful of it. I'll explain who she is later. Then he looked back at Ben. What do you mean anyway about Nefarious? Well, Ben paused and placed his arms by his sides. The toothy smirk him disappeared, as he became a bit serious, knowing what he had to do. Nefarious was beaten, but not in the way we hoped. We were able to strp him off his powers, but he made a last attempt to escape. I bet he's very hurt, but he's still alive and a threat to the multiverse. So as much as I would like to hang around for a bit, I have to get going and stop Nefarious for good. Now it all made sense. The news, however, didn't make Aang or the Water Tribe's siblings feel any good. In fact, it made both sad as they realized that Ben would have to leave, hence small frowns formed on their faces. Fortunately, Aang became a bit lighter about it as he walked over to Ben and stretched his hand out for a handshake. Well, I can't say it hasn't been good knowing you, Ben. Aang stated friendly. He let a small smile to form on his face as he looked straight at Ben, continuing. Take good care of yourself. I hope to hear from you again. Same. Ben replied back and smiled. He then followed this comment with a grasp of Aang's hand, which then led to a handshake. Watch over Katara really close, dude. You're a lucky guy. Aang liked hearing that. It made him smile a bit more than he intended as he continued the handshake with the teen hero. But just as everything must come to an end, so did the handshake. Ben turned to Sokka, who got back on his feet and stood before him, smirking down at him before punching the younger teen's chest lightly as a joke. Hey, thanks for being there for Aang. You have no idea how much I appreciate that. Sokka said honestly. Who knows, maybe when you're done with that freak you can get back here so we can hang out a bit longer. I get the feeling we might have something in common. I would like that. Ben replied. Ben. Katara called out. Now it was the Water Tribe girl's turn to say her own words. She watched as Ben turned away from her brother before walking over to him with a soft smile on her face. Then, upon getting close to him, she embraced him in a light hug and felt it return back to her. Thank you. Thank you so much. Katara said gratefully. There was no better way she could have expressed it than at that moment. We didn't get to know each other well, but I know you'll make it through no matter what. Thanks. Ben said back. And so with came the end of their goodbyes. Katara and Ben released each other from their embrace before walked away from everyone and headed to the still-present portal he and Aang came through earlier. But before he actually stepped through, he turned to his new friends with a grateful smile on his face. It's been great getting to know you guys. Hopefully, I'll get to see you all again. However, there was one thing that Aang noticed. It wasn't bad, but it was something he brought up as he spoke up to the Omnitrix user. Wait, you're not using Ultimate Ben? He asked. I know that form is dangerous, but you might need him to beat Nefarious. I might, Ben replied with a calm voice. But I think I'm done with him for good. Ultimate Ben was able to fuse with you and work well because our minds and Rava was able to maintain it. But if we're to use it alone, I don't think I'll be able to restrain myself from doing something I'll normally regret. Besides, Ultimate Ben became that way because of the pain of loss I went through. But now that I've come to terms with it, I'll take Nefarious down the old BEN10 way. Aang liked the sound of that. Alright. Good luck, Ben. He said. Thanks. Ben smiled back. So with that said, the teen turned his attention back to the portal. He knew this portal would lead him to another world, though to where that'll be was a mystery. Hence, he took his chances and walked into the portal. It closed right behind him immediately after, taking him away from that world and to another. While Ben was peacefully heading to another universe, the same couldn't be said about Nefarious. He had made it out from his own redirected blast like Ben said, but barely. Hence, it came as no surprise that he laid on his back against the base of a tree, back in his normal human-like form but in a very terrible state. He had large cuts and wounds all over his body, as half his hair were gone, leaving a part of him bald. Also, the clothes that remained were just tattered brown pants, which in itself only covered his private part. What's taking her so long? Nefarious panted heavily. The supervillain, right at this point, was clinging to life. He didn't know how long he had left to live, except that he needed medical help as soon as possible. Fortunately for him, his prayers seemed answered as a blue portal appeared before Blackfire walked out with a brown back in her right hand and a bottle of pink liquid in it. I see you made it out alive but barely. Blackfire commented. To think Tennyson beat you again. This is very unfortunate. If Vlad and the other had picked up on the signal before me you would have been. That's enough. Nefarious yelled, at least tried to. The pain in throat was becoming too insurable. Fortunately, Blackfire seemed to understand his predicament as she immediately kept number and walked over to him. But that isn't to say she didn't shoot an annoyed glare and dropped the brown sack on the ground. Take this, Blackfire said. The thing she mentioned was the bottle in her hand as she knelt close to Nefarious and brought it to his lips. The supervillain knew what it was and so he opened his mouth a bit and let the female Tamiran sip the liquid right into his mouth till it was entirely empty. Just then, it happened. The deep wounds and cuts Nefarious suffered through began to close up rapidly as he could feel his strength restoring in a rapid pace. Though it wasn't to his fullest, he felt just about fine as he let out a groan and stood back on his feet, his hair fully restored. That's better. Nefarious commented. However, that wasn't to say he was entirely pleased. In fact, he had a small scowl on his face before turning to Blackfire, who stood up back on her feet, facing him. Thank you, Blackfire. You'll be rewarded greatly for your loyalty. Humph, I like the sound of that. Blackfire smirked. But that doesn't explain how you lost to Tennyson. Nefarious hummed, though it sounded more like a small growl. Very well, I underestimated Tennyson and the hero of that world due to the temptation of higher power. But no more. I will acquire the book of narration and I will change the multiverse into my image. However, the task won't be easy, that is why I asked you to bring the equipments. This war between Tennyson and I is far from over. Blackfire liked the sound of that. She said nothing about it though, but placed her left hand on her hip as the smirk on her face grew a bit longer. As for Nefarious, he walked over to the sack Blackfire had dropped on the ground and opened it just in time to then bring out his metal scythe with one hand, and some clothes in the other. Ah, back to the old-fashioned way. Nefarious said and grinned. Then he turned back to Blackfire. Is the portal set to the universe I requested as an alternate plan if I failed? Yes. Blackfire answered. But might I ask why you want to go to that world? I gave it a look and it's kind of like Tennyson. The only difference is the person who possesses the Omnitrix. I'm aware of that. Nefarious told her. That is why I'm going there. In that world he has no Omnitrix because his cousin is the one who possesses it. But knowing the Tennyson we know, he'll likely come for me, that is why I won't hold back against any of them. Alright, I hear ya. Blackfire said. Good luck out there. I expect my reward. You will. And with that came the end of their interaction. Nefarious turned his back at Blackfire and walked into the portal, leaving Blackfire alone. Fortunately, the Tamiran didn't mind this, as she crossed her arms under her chest and watched the portal closed, with a thought of her reward in mind. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for more crossovers. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and Man of Cartoons on fanfiction.net. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.